Hello and good morning. My name is Mark. I'm coming from Seattle, where it's nice and sunny. And I had to talk about the recent Christchurch shooting in New Zealand and how it ties back to some of the celebrities that we tend to think are more innocent than they actually are. We live in a culture and a society dominated by white privilege. We live in a culture where a vast majority of executives and CEOs, a vast majority of government positions, from anything from a school board to Congress and the state houses, are all dominated by whites. Whites dominate every position of power in our culture, and thus they've helped create the customs and norms that we are used to in our society. And so when a lot of people are going to defend a lot of the influencers of this type of racist, white supremacist ideologies, such as the jokes told by PewDiePie and others like him, where people think that they're not a big deal and that the humor is subtle and that it doesn't have a really huge impact, when in actuality it does. Because even if he himself, PewDiePie, doesn't have any sort of actual motives to commit violence, by normalizing that type of microaggression humor, or what they think is subtle humor that's really racist, it leads other people to tell those jokes, and they think it's just something to joke around about and that it's not a big deal. But when you tell a joke enough times, it becomes something that you start to believe in yourself. If you keep going around telling your friends the same jokes, all your friends agree with it, you essentially become this kind of bouncing back and forth, what some like to call an echo chamber, although that term's kind of used loosely to try to denounce people's views or blah blah blah, but we'll ignore that. But it's where, when you have a lot of those conversations back and forth, and it just builds up this mentality, oh yeah, people love this joke, this joke's pretty good, there must be, subtly you're going to start thinking that there must be some sort of truth to it. And you can't keep telling yourself the same kind of jokes or stereotypes, assumptions about people because of their because of their social status set, whether it be gender identity, race, etc., and think that because of those racist humor, oh, it's just a joke. Um, it's not a joke when it becomes a practice of you telling that joke constantly and reinforcing it in your mind all the time. You might call it entertainment, but there's only so many times you can tell a joke when it becomes more of a statement than a joke. And that kind of humor teaches others, especially more susceptible to influence, like younger people, teenagers, children. They hear those jokes, they actually start thinking that some of the elements of those jokes are real. That the reason we tell them is because those stereotypes are real. I mean, I used to have opinions when I was a kid, stereotypes that I thought were just like something that they do. Like, I won't go into specifics because I hate all of those stereotypes, but there are times where I thought, oh, well, maybe people do this, just like the joke says. And I learned that no, there's a lot more complicated nuance to that, and there's a lot of explanations from individuals to the location to, stereotypes can be broken down and easily researched and see what the reality is, and a lot of stereotypes are just junk. And you should never stereotype someone, period. But a lot of things like that get taught and people believe it. So the PewDiePie, even if PewDiePie himself does not believe some of the humor that he has told in the past regarding Jews, for example, people who practice Judaism, about making jokes, and he's like, oh, well, it's just light humor. He's going to tell people who will not see it that way and will think, oh, well, it might be humorous and funny to talk about, but eventually I think that this might actually have truth to it because it's funny, it makes sense. I think that those stereotypes got to be true. And one of my political or celebrity icons, like a Let's player that keeps telling people these jokes, is going to be someone that's going to be like, okay, well, if my heroes or my celebrities that I look up to keep saying these things, then I'm going to be susceptible to believing them. It's just like the common reality of this. And so we see that how people mimic their favorite celebrities, how they want to be like them, And that's one of the many problems with American celebrity culture that I think can be toxic, where we just idolize and fantasize about people without kind of understanding that we don't like humans tend to create heroes and that's one thing where we learn our morals from others and try to gain from that. But we also put too much stock in what some of these celebrities do, and we try to follow them a little too closely, and we give up our own kind of individuality by allowing these celebrities to sort of dictate how we view the world. And some people allow that to happen without their own self-inner thought about what's right and wrong and what seems reasonable and what does not seem reasonable. And so PewDiePie being able to brush off all of this is just nonsensical. And I'm tired of how we think that our entertainment of Let's Players is that entertainment is more important than standing up for marginalized communities. And it's getting to the point to where it just gets sickening. It's like we think our desire to be laughing, to have fun is more important than the lives of real people who suffer every single day. Whether it be white supremacists terrorizing people who practice Islam, if they are on the bus, just like that woman in Portland that was harassed by a white supremacist. I mean, if we allow people or to tolerate jokes about Judaism and to stereotype them just like the Steve Bannon and the alt-right scum that have done just that. I mean, if we allow that to propagate in our culture and pretend it's free speech, then it's going to become something that's going to be normalized. And it's going to be a socialization point where people are going to be grown up socialized to think that these type of ideologies and norms are acceptable about how we treat people of other belief systems, of other ethnic groups, racial, the construct of race. If we like start thinking that, you know, because you're a certain skin color that suddenly you have a certain negative trait about you, and we propagate that view, then it's going to lead to more violence. And the problem is that we need to be willing to stand up to some of these celebrity figures and tell them that this is unacceptable, that humor like that is unacceptable. It is not something that we should just overlook because we want to protect our favorite celebrities. And it's gross to me that some people don't want to challenge the people that do tell these type of jokes. And you know, and I have to call it Markiplier. I know how much that's going to piss off some of my fellow millennials and whatnot, but I mean, at the same time, that's Markiplier standing up for PewDiePie and saying he has nothing and no responsibility. Yes, he didn't directly kill the person. He shouldn't be charged with a crime, but his behavior has to change. He has to drop all racist jokes, mocking people for their belief systems. And I don't mean belief systems that cause violence to others. I mean, like, people who, like, there's one thing to be critical of people who use their religion for violence. It's another to just brandish an entire religion as something that's just innately violent and that every single person who practices is bad. Because we can definitely go after America's favorite religion, Christianity, for the Crusades and Inquisition and how they treated native populations and how they rationalize that as something that God wants. I mean, hell, we have the Mormons who have practiced beliefs. You know, it might not be something they hold true to this day, but they believe that people with darker skin were punished by God. And I mean, it's just that type of junk that's all over the US. It's all over, you know, and it's not just the US either. And we pretend like the US is the only bastion of white supremacy. It's definitely a ground for a lot of white supremacists. And because of our gun culture, they have a lot of power to cause violence. But let's not pretend that fucking white supremacy stops at the border. I mean, a lot of violence that has gone through or has gone on throughout our last millennia has become European colonization of the global South and the exploitation of their resources and enslavement of the local people. And that is something that has transcended American borders, that is all over the world. And so white supremacy is a major issue that's going to be impacting lots of different countries, lots of different people, and we have to be accepting that this transcends our borders and that we in America have to do our part to try to rein this in, but it needs to be a global effort to get the white supremacy ideology. I mean, again, Germany and the Holocaust and how they treated people of color, people of different belief systems, people who are queer. It's just, it's to me, it shows that this is a worldwide issue, and we shouldn't just isolate it in dialogues of just American politics or the American centric perspective. And we need to see the issue for what it is. And we need to stop standing up for people that, even if they give us the greatest entertainment and we love them so much, if they say shitty things, you need to be willing to stand up and call them out for saying those shitty things, instead of just being like, oh, well, I like them too much, and my bias for their friendship, or, well, not friendship, but my bias towards their being fans of them and supporting them is more important than standing up for human lives, human rights, and what is decent to treat other people. And telling racist jokes, telling sexist jokes, telling homophobic, transphobic, etc. jokes is unacceptable. That is, you're unoriginal. You're perpetuating ideologies of violence by doing so. You're legitimizing violence. You're legitimizing second-class citizenship for others. I mean, you're just being shitty. And you need to, people need to stop, look at their celebrities, and be willing to critique them, just like a politician and just like anyone else in a status of influence who can impact other people and how they view the world. And so we need to be willing to stand up. And that, to me, is the most important message, that one of the most important messages that can be learned from this is to not allow the Ben Shapiros, the PewDiePies, the whatever, to go turn around and say, oh, I had nothing to do with this, because that's bullshit.